Looking for something to read? Well, these are the books that I've written. Hop on down to the description to find the Amazon links for all 4 of them, and keep your eyes open for more in the future. With that said, on to the video. Hello ladies and gentlemen, I am the Omni viewer, and it's time for part 2 of our comparison between the original Godzilla and Shin Godzilla. If you're just joining us, I recommend watching part 1 first. I'll also remind everyone that in order to avoid confusion, the 1954 film will be referred to as GOJIRA, the 2016 film will be referred to as Shin, and the central monster will be referred to as Godzilla in both cases. That last bit is especially pertinent to this video, because now is the time we'll be looking at Godzilla himself. Why didn't you discuss Godzilla in the character section again? You're always saying how monsters should be treated as characters, so singling him out seems like an odd choice. Well, part 1 was getting kinda long, and I figured Godzilla needed his own spotlight. Yeah, you normally think that anyway. True, but in this case we're going very deep into the analysis. I suspect that when most people call Shin the one true successor to Gojira, they're partially referring to how it's one of the few films where Godzilla has no opponent, and how he serves as an allegory for major catastrophic events in Japanese history. Not that it's the only such film in the series to do either of those, but that's beside the point. Right now, we need to keep our focus on the primary subject, so let's get to it. Just like last time, we'll be starting with the original. You've no doubt heard plenty of dissertations about how this first Godzilla is the embodiment of nuclear holocaust, something the people of Japan knew more intimately than most after World War II ended. A discussion about the film's thematic side is worth having, but I want to save that for later. Right now, our focus is specifically on how Godzilla is portrayed in the movie. Yet again, we see another reason why Gojira stood out among the creature features of the 50s. In America at the time, it was difficult to find giant monsters with personalities. They existed, but they were uncommon. For every emir, there were a dozen deadly mantises, creatures that just attacked and smashed without displaying any higher thought processes. In a crowd like that, it was easy for Godzilla to rise to the top because he was a proper character. I risk showing my hand a bit early here, but I've seen a surprising number of Shin defenders claim that Godzilla does not have a personality in the original film, and only developed one as the series went on to distinguish him from other monsters that showed up. There's a term for what that claim is, but I can't quite put my finger on it.
How about a bald-faced lie?
Oh yeah, how could I forget? Sorry to be blunt, folks, but if you ever hear somebody claim that Godzilla didn't have a personality in the original Gojira, that person is just plain dead wrong. Godzilla displays a strong personality throughout the movie. For the most part, he is angry for having been disturbed and irradiated, and now he seeks to attack the offending party. It's the very groundwork for Godzilla's defining personality trait, his determination to fight whoever he deems his enemy. Besides that, look at all of the little details sprinkled throughout that give us insights as to who he is. Consider how he pauses at the high-tension wires, looking for a way around before deciding he may as well just go through, only to then viciously attack the towers when they attempt to hurt him. Look at his confusion and annoyance at the chiming clock. Observe his curiosity as he first encounters the Otojima Island expedition, or his tranquility as he rests on the ocean floor. Behold the anguish as he succumbs to the oxygen destroyer. These are all moments that show Godzilla as a thinking, feeling creature, just like the humans he shares the screen with. Godzilla did not start out as a blank slate. He was always a character. Later sequels and reboots would simply build on what was already present from day one. Sure, layers would be added later, and his role would vary and change, but Godzilla was always Godzilla from the very beginning. That's why Toho was able to make him into their biggest star. Staying on that track, Gojira can be considered a masterclass at visual storytelling, because we can discern and understand Godzilla's motivations purely through the visuals without needing them blatantly spelled out for us. So indulge me for a moment while I blatantly spell them out for you. Consider why Godzilla comes ashore. Obviously, the first thing that brings him into the modern world is nuclear testing. He's sleeping peacefully in an underground pocket, then a bomb goes off that irradiates him. Angered and wounded by the disturbance, he comes to the surface to retaliate at the first thing he sees, which happens to be the Bingo Maru, a ship that had nothing to do with the bombing, but he doesn't know that. After preemptively attacking another unrelated vessel, he then returns instinctively to his species' old stomping ground of Odo Island, where he causes damage, but it appears to be unintentional. Of course, when the Japanese government finds out that he exists, he's declared an enemy to be killed with death charges. Godzilla doesn't die, but he is ticked off, and now the Japanese are officially on his crap list, so he follows the ships that bombed him back to their port of origin. His first landfall is just to survey the territory, which is when the train rams his foot. That's an accident, but Godzilla interprets it as another attack, which motivates him to come back in full force and ensure that no one in Tokyo can ever hurt him again. Once he's exacted his revenge, the next time we see him, he's relaxing, finally satisfied that his troubles are over. None of this is outright stated in the movie, but it can be easily inferred from what's presented on screen.
Come to think of it, there's kind of a tragic poetry to how Godzilla dies. You may recall that we're told at the beginning of the movie he was just slumbering peacefully until a bomb woke him up. Is it a coincidence then that at the end we find him slumbering once more?
Here he is once more peacefully resting, and once again mankind is intruding. Unlike other giant monsters, Godzilla is not killed when he is on the attack, but rather when he is at peace. He has sated his desire for vengeance, and now is content to rest. Then in come Ogata and Serizawa, skulking towards him like Macbeth entering King Duncan's chambers. By showing us Godzilla in a rare moment where he's not the aggressor, the film reminds us that Godzilla is not truly a villain, but a victim in his own right, and the fact that he must die is just as great a tragedy as the destruction of Tokyo.
Not many giant monster movies had that perspective in the 50s. Gojira is one of the few that did, so it's no surprise that it wound up becoming the basis for a long-running series that runs strong to this day. Now, when it comes to Shin's version of Godzilla, how did the movie put it again?
All that it's done so far is move.
Oh yes, how could I forget?
Because just walking is forgettable.
Yes, I know. That was a rhetorical question.
Shin's version of Godzilla is infamously unresponsive and immobile. He just moves forward and barely reacts to anything around him.
You can chalk this up to whatever you want, budgetary restraints, creative choice, or whatever, but the result is still the same. This Godzilla lacks a personality.
I would say he's basically a walking statue, but then again, I've seen kaiju that actually are walking statues with more personality than this Godzilla, so as far as I'm concerned, this is inexcusable.
He doesn't even do that much attacking if you think about it, which makes his actions kind of boring.
Now I know what you're going to say. This Godzilla displays the most power of any previous Godzilla thanks to that one attack where he uses his heat ray non-stop and incinerates a good chunk of Tokyo in a matter of seconds.
Well, fine, it is an impressive display of raw power, and it's got some nice imagery, I suppose. But the thing is, it feels impersonal.
In the original film, Godzilla destroys Tokyo by marching through it and tearing it down directly. He does use his heat ray, but not that often. The rest of the time, his hands, feet, tail, and jaws are his instruments of destruction.
This makes the original Godzilla's attack very personal.
Godzilla is not content to simply burn Tokyo. He must tear it down, unleashing his full fury on mankind in face-to-face combat. Presumably, he doesn't have to destroy everything around him, but he deliberately chooses to, and he does it physically.
Maybe I'm old-fashioned, but I find a monster that keeps getting closer and closer to you until you can't get away is far more menacing than a monster who keeps his distance.
As I recall, one of the biggest critiques leveled against the Heisei films is how they gradually became over-reliant on beam attacks, turning the fights into laser shows which made them less interesting because they no longer had that personal element that comes with wrestling.
Granted, those are fights, so it is slightly different, but the underlying problem remains with Shin. Just watching something shooting lasers isn't all that interesting.
Now sure, the 2016 Godzilla causes this kind of physical destruction when he first makes landfall, but then again he also looks like a giant rubber chicken and still only destroys what's directly in front of him.
Even so, I will concede that this attack does feel a bit more personal because Godzilla is causing the damage directly, instead of just being rooted in place and spamming one attack until he gets tired and needs to go night-night. Although, this attack is more about accidental damage than an intentional assault.
That actually brings us back to another problem with Shin, one that I've alluded to in previous videos. Why does Godzilla come ashore in this movie? What is his motivation?
Something happens at the beginning that forces him ashore, even though it's never specified what. I guess the expanded materials say it has something to do with the ever-elusive Goromaki, but like I keep saying, good movies don't need patches to cover gaping holes.
This time, though, let's play along with that for at least a little bit. So, Goromaki does something that causes Godzilla to come ashore at the beginning. I can accept that. So why does he come back?
Technically speaking, coming ashore for the first time caused Godzilla to nearly overheat and die, prompting a hasty retreat back to the sea. We also later learn that Godzilla can willfully alter his body however he wants. So why does he decide that evolving into something capable of surviving on land is a good idea? It's established that he doesn't need to feed on nuclear waste anymore, or anything else for that matter, so it has nothing to do with finding food.
As mentioned, Godzilla comes ashore in the original Gojira to strike back at his attackers. But Godzilla is not attacked on his first appearance in Shin.
An attack is mounted, but ultimately abandoned, and as far as Godzilla knows, these helicopters never meant him harm anyway, so he's not coming back for revenge. Since he's the only monster in the film, he's also clearly not after some rival kaiju. Given the explanation that Godzilla is deliberately evolving throughout the film, we also can't chalk it up to uncontrollable mutation. If he has a particular goal in mind, we never get so much as a hint of what it is, not even in passing.
It would seem the answer to this question is the one I concluded many years ago. Godzilla comes ashore in this movie because there is no movie if he doesn't. In light of all of this, can we really call the 2016 Godzilla a character? He has no personality and he has no motivation, so I certainly hesitate to apply the term.
Now, you might say that he has hints of a more animalistic personality because he reacts to things like an animal would. I dispute the execution of that notion in most shots, as this Godzilla really doesn't seem to react all that often to anything. The most obvious reaction he has is to being bombed in Tokyo, which is when he develops the ability to shoot lasers as a counterattack.
The problem is that just having a reaction is not the same thing as having a personality. You can get a reaction by pouring a spoonful of baking soda into a bottle of vinegar, but that doesn't make the vinegar a compelling character. Without a personality, the reaction is a mindless one, so there's little reason to get that invested when it happens.
You do realize people are going to bring up who will know, don't you?
I do, and my thoughts on that are already prepared.
I'm sure plenty of people have scrolled down to the comments section ready to explain that Who Will Know, the song that underscores the destruction of Tokyo, is proof that this Godzilla is a proper character because the lyrics are written from Godzilla's perspective.
And look, I can agree that the song is a beautiful aria in its own right, and the lyrics are interesting, and I guess I appreciate the effort that went into making it, but I don't think that is a legitimate excuse.
Who Will Know is an operatic piece written in English, and as someone who speaks fluent English, I can say with certainty that this song is not easy to understand unless you have the lyrics in front of you to read along with. Between the odd enunciations and the drawn-out syllables, some words aren't even recognizable as English upon first listening.
And this is all before we even get to how the song is implemented in the movie itself.
The lyrics are difficult to understand on their own, but when placed in context of the scene, you now have spoken dialogue and blaring sound effects thrown into the audio mix. These render the lyrics largely inaudible and basically incomprehensible, and it may as well be faux Latin gibberish for all that it matters.
You see, if this is really our one and only look into Godzilla's personality, making it impossible to understand is a huge mistake. If we can't understand the lyrics over the explosions, Godzilla's personality is lost, and I award no points for looking it up later.
Think of it this way. Look at the titular sequence from the movie Singin' in the Rain. You will notice that the rain in which Gene Kelly is singing is audible, but it doesn't drown out the music and lyrics.
Let the stormy clouds chase everyone from the place
You see what I'm talking about? The rain is audible, yes, so it helps us feel like we're really outside in a rainstorm as opposed to inside on a closed set. But the audio levels of the rain are kept down so it doesn't drown out the song, which is the actual focus of the scene. If we were to make the volume levels a bit more realistic, though, here are the results. Doesn't work as well, does it?
The real irony is that this song, despite being the title track, isn't even that vital to the story it's in, certainly not as vital as Who Will Know is supposed to be. So if this is really our only clue about who Godzilla is, it should have been highlighted better. The alternative, of course, is to have Godzilla show his personality elsewhere in the film and not use your soundtrack as a crutch, but hey, it's not as if film is a visual medium or anything, right?
Here, if I may diverge slightly from the focus of this evening's symposium, I do have another counterexample. In Godzilla King of the Monsters 2019... Oh, for crying out loud, just hear me out!
The score for this film by Bear McCreary notably features vocal elements mixed in with the instruments. Most of it consists of a male choir chanting the names of the Big Four, with a few extra bits in Japanese thrown in for Godzilla's theme. However, there are some other lyrics in certain pieces, particularly when Ghidorah is on screen, chanted as a sort of ancient prayer, as well as the aria Goodbye Old Friend. The lyrics for that were written in English and then translated into Ancient Sumerian, which is what you hear in the finished score.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm guessing most of you don't speak Ancient Sumerian, so there's no possible way you could understand these lyrics unless you had a translation with you in your hands, like the one that accompanies the physical CD. Yet another reason to keep physical media alive. However, the implementation in King of the Monsters is vastly superior to the implementation in Shin.
Like I said, the lyrics to Goodbye Old Friend are in Ancient Sumerian, a language that's deader than Latin. If you know what the lyrics mean, they're quite beautiful, but without the translation, you're not going to understand them even without the sound effects of the scene it underscores.
The beauty of it is, you don't need to. Everything in this scene can be understood simply by watching it.
The performances, the cinematography, and even the setting itself all convey everything the audience needs to know. The music makes it even better, but if you were to remove it, the scene would still work.
Heck, I may as well just come right out and say it. The reason we feel sympathy for Godzilla in this scene is because his personality has been on display in the movie prior to this point.
We can discern it through his expressions, his body language, and his actions whenever he shows up. Goodbye Old Friend enhances what's already there, rather than serving as the musical equivalent of an exposition dump like Who Will Know does.
Which song you think is better comes down to personal preference, but in terms of implementation, there's no contest. I will always say King of the Monsters did it better. Lest I forget, there is one last thing to discuss regarding Godzilla. You may have noticed that earlier in the video, and in various other videos I've made, I've stated that Godzilla is not just depicted as the embodiment of nuclear holocaust, but also as a victim of it.
Godzilla was hurt by the bomb, even if he survived, and that pain drives him to attack. Yet it's also what makes us care for him. We know that he never wanted any of this, and nothing he does is because he's evil. Godzilla's tragedy is that he became the very thing he was a victim of, thus perpetuating a cycle of horror which he never asked to be part of in the first place.
This is not the case in Shin. Here, Godzilla is no victim.
Exposure to radioactive material allowed him to become a higher form of life capable of reshaping the whole planet, and as mentioned before, his evolution is deliberate rather than random.
Despite his grotesque appearance, there's no apparent downside to Godzilla having become a radioactive mutation. Heck, it's the best thing that could have possibly happened to him, which means he's no victim. In this case, he's just another radioactive giant monster that mankind needs to defeat through ingenuity and origami, which means there's really no reason to feel sympathy for him.
For something that's meant to be an almost remake of Gojira, this removal of nuance is the worst possible change that could have been made to the titular monster. It makes me wonder if Anno really understands the original film.
Well, it looks like Shin is 0 for 2 at this point, but then again, I've only just scratched the surface when it comes to these movies.
Next time, we'll be going even deeper into the iceberg and discussing the themes. But until such time as that happens, this is the Omni viewer signing off. You know, this is a bit of a smaller detail, but I'm also kind of annoyed that Shin not only failed to give Godzilla his own distinct roar, but that it got the two recycled roars it did use mixed up. I kind of feel like the OG roar would have worked much better if it came out of the fourth form. But I'm not in charge of making the movie, so whatever.
Thank you all for watching. If you want to see us keep doing what we're doing, you might consider doing all the usual YouTube things, as well as hopping down to the description to find links to DeviantArt, Patreon, Twitter, and links for the different books in the Tales from the Omni Vault universe. Your support is naturally appreciated. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.